The sun had just begun to set, casting a warm golden glow through the windows of our family home. The light filtered through the leaves of the old oak tree in the front yard, dancing in playful patterns on the floor. It was a sight I had seen 1,000 times before, and yet it never failed to bring a sense of peace and serenity to the living room. The house was old, but it was filled with memories, laughter, and the comforting knowledge that it was the place my family had always called home. My wife, Sarah, was in the kitchen, humming a soft tune as she prepared dinner. Our daughter, Emily, was sitting cross-legged on the floor, her attention absorbed by the colorful pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. Occasionally, she would look up and flash me a smile, her eyes full of the innocence and joy of childhood. I watched her, feeling a deep sense of contentment, grateful for the simple pleasures of life. The tranquility of the evening was suddenly interrupted by a chill that crept through the room. It was as if a window had been left open on a winter's night, sending an unexpected shiver down my spine. I looked around, puzzled, seeing nothing out of the ordinary. Sarah seemed undisturbed in the kitchen, her gentle humming continuing unabated. Emily, focused on her puzzle, appeared equally oblivious to the sudden change in atmosphere. "Daddy, can you help me with this piece?" Emily's voice broke the silence, her small hand holding up a piece of the puzzle. I walked over to her, kneeling by her side. The puzzle was of a vibrant garden, flowers blooming in every imaginable color. Together, we managed to find the right spot for the piece, and she clapped her hands in delight. It wasn't long before I felt it again, a presence, subtle yet undeniable, standing just beyond the threshold of my awareness. It was like the echo of a voice, just out of reach, whispering my name. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the sensation. Perhaps it was the stress of work or the exhaustion from a restless night's sleep. But the feeling lingered, casting a shadow over the warmth of our home. That night, as I lay in bed beside Sarah, sleep eluded me. Our bedroom was dark, save for the faint glow of the street lamp filtering through the curtains. I could hear the soothing rhythm of Sarah's breath as she slept, each exhale a reminder of the life and love we shared. Yet, the sense of unease persisted, clinging to me like a shroud. I closed my eyes, willing myself to drift into the embrace of sleep. A noise, soft yet distinct, pulled me from the brink of slumber. It was the sound of a child's laughter, echoing faintly through the halls. I sat up, heart racing, straining to listen in the stillness that followed. The laughter came again, this time closer, a melodic giggle that tugged at the edges of my memory. "Emily?" I whispered into the darkness, though I knew she was asleep in her room. I slipped out of bed, careful not to disturb Sarah, and made my way down the hall. Emily's door was ajar, allowing a sliver of moonlight to spill into the corridor. I peeked inside, my breath catching in my throat. Emily was there, sleeping soundly, her small form curled beneath her blanket. I exhaled softly, relief washing over me. But the laughter continued, drawing me further down the hallway, past the shadows that seemed to stretch and shift in the moonlight. It led me to the living room, where the golden glow of daylight had been replaced by the silvery sheen of night. The room was empty, yet the laughter persisted. It was a haunting echo, as if the walls themselves were whispering secrets from long ago. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice barely more than a whisper. The laughter ceased abruptly, leaving a silence so profound it was almost tangible. I stood there for a moment, heart pounding, before turning back towards the bedroom. As I did, the air grew cold once more, a lingering presence brushing against my skin like a forgotten memory. The following morning, I awoke to the sound of Emily's voice. "Daddy, are you okay?" she asked, her eyes searching mine. I forced a smile, nodding as I ruffled her hair. But her question lingered, echoing in my mind as I went about my day. Was I okay? And what was it that had been haunting the corners of our home? Days passed, the laughter revisiting me each night, a spectral reminder of something lost and forgotten. I began to notice other things too. A soft humming in the distance, the scent of roses where none should be, the fleeting sensation of being watched. Each experience was subtle, easily dismissed in the light of day, yet they collected in my mind like pieces of a puzzle, forming a picture I couldn't quite see. On an evening much like the first, I found myself in the living room once more, the twilight casting long shadows across the walls. Emily was asleep, Sarah dozing beside me as we watched an old film. The warmth of her presence should have been comforting, but the chill had returned, more insistent now, a silent urging that couldn't be ignored. I turned to Sarah, about to speak, when the laughter returned, louder and more distinct than before. It was not merely a sound now, it was a presence, filling the room with an energy that was both familiar and strange. I stood up, compelled to follow its call, my heart heavy with a mix of dread and curiosity. The laughter led me to the window, where the old oak tree stood silhouetted against the night sky. Its branches swayed gently in the breeze, casting moving shadows on the ground. And there, beneath its boughs, stood a figure, a child, her form faint but unmistakable in the moonlight. I blinked, certain it was a trick of the light, yet the figure remained, her eyes meeting mine with an intensity that sent a shiver through my soul. She seemed to smile, a soft curve of her lips that was both comforting and unsettling. I couldn't move, rooted to the spot by a force beyond comprehension. "Daddy," the voice came, soft and melodic, echoing through the night. "Are you okay?" The words were the same as Emily's, yet they resonated differently, a deeper connection that transcended time and space. My heart ached with a longing I could not understand, and tears filled my eyes as I struggled to respond. "Who are you?" I managed to whisper, though the words felt inadequate in the face of such a revelation. The child did not answer, her form beginning to fade as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon. I reached out, desperate to hold on to this moment, but she was gone, leaving only the rustling of leaves in her wake. In the days that followed, the encounters grew more frequent, the apparitions lingering longer each time. The child would appear in the garden, on the stairs, in the reflections of windows, always watching, always silent. She was both a stranger and something intimately familiar, a paradox that haunted the edges of my consciousness. My nights were filled with restless dreams, visions of a life that might have been. I saw a girl laughing as she played beneath the oak tree, her hair catching the sunlight as she ran through fields of wildflowers. Her laughter was the same as Emily's, yet it carried an echo of something lost, a bittersweet melody that tugged at my heart. "Are you okay, Daddy?" The question haunted my waking hours, an insistent reminder of the child who had become a part of our lives, an enigma wrapped in the shroud of the past. I found myself drawn to the old oak tree, spending hours beneath its branches, searching for answers in the patterns of light and shadow. One evening, as the sky darkened and the first stars appeared, I felt her presence beside me. She was more tangible now, a spectral figure of light and memory, her eyes searching mine with a depth that seemed to bridge the chasm of time. "Why are you here?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. The wind rustled the leaves, a gentle murmur that was both comforting and otherworldly. She reached out, her hand almost touching mine, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. "To watch over you," she replied, her voice a soft caress that lingered in the air. "To make sure you're okay." Her words were a balm to my soul, easing the ache of unspoken grief. Yet they also carried a weight of sorrow, a reminder of the fragility of life and the bonds that transcend its boundaries. I closed my eyes, feeling her presence wrap around me like a gentle embrace, a connection that was as real as it was ephemeral. When I opened my eyes, she was gone, leaving only the whisper of wind through the leaves. I sat there for a long time, the stars overhead bearing silent witness to the passage of time. And as the night deepened, the sense of lingering fear began to fade, replaced by a quiet acceptance, a realization that some mysteries are not meant to be understood, only embraced. The following day, as the sun rose over our home, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The child had become a part of our lives, a guardian spirit who watched over us from the shadows, her presence a reminder of the love that endures beyond the veil of the world. "Daddy, are you okay?" Emily asked, her voice filled with the innocence of childhood. I smiled, pulling her close, my heart full of gratitude for the life we shared. "Yes, Emily," I replied, my voice steady and sure. "I'm okay." And in that moment, beneath the canopy of the old oak tree, I knew that we were watched over, cared for by a presence that was both a part of us and beyond our understanding. The fear had become a gentle whisper, a reminder of the unseen connections that bind us all, a mystery that had found its place in the fabric of our lives. The soft glow of dawn filtered through the delicate curtains of my suburban home, a quaint little house nestled among a row of identical structures. The neighborhood was a symphony of chirping sparrows and the distant hum of early morning traffic. I took a deep breath, savoring the moment as I wrapped my hands around a steaming cup of coffee. Life, as I knew it, was routine and comforting, the days blending seamlessly into one another like brush strokes on a canvas. My husband, Mark, was already dressed for work, his tie perfectly knotted, an ever-present smile playing on his lips. He kissed me lightly on the cheek, whispering a promise to return by dinner. Our daughter, Emily, was still asleep, her 6-year-old form cocooned in pastel sheets. Her presence was a constant source of joy, her laughter a melody that soothed any lingering disquietude. As she slept, I often found myself standing at her doorway, marveling at the sheer innocence that radiated from her small frame. The morning unfolded like any other. I prepared breakfast, tidied the rooms, and made a mental checklist of the errands to run. Emily stirred awake, her tiny footsteps padding across the hardwood floor. We settled into a comfortable routine, breakfast done, dishes washed, and the day ahead laid out with precision. It was a comforting normalcy, one that gave me a sense of purpose. But life has a way of shifting beneath our feet, subtly and imperceptibly at first. The first signs were barely noticeable, like whispers in a breeze, dismissible if you weren't paying attention. It began with the phone calls, unknown numbers that rang incessantly, only to fall silent the moment I answered. I chalked it up to telemarketers, a nuisance but no real threat. Then came the letters. Anonymous envelopes slipped into our mailbox, each one containing a single sheet of paper with a simple, unsettling message: she knows. I dismissed them as pranks, albeit ones that left a disquieting impression. Mark was unconcerned, his reassurance a balm that momentarily eased my anxiety. Some juvenile prankster, he suggested, probably bored and looking for some mischief. He was so confident, his demeanor unruffled, and I let his calmness seep into my bones. Yet, there was a part of me that couldn't shake the feeling of unease, like an itch just out of reach. Days turned into weeks, and the disturbances persisted, seemingly growing bolder with each passing day. I felt watched, an unsettling sensation that shadowed my every move. The feeling was most intense in Emily's room, where the air seemed to thicken with an unspoken tension. I began to notice small things out of place. A toy shifted slightly from where it had been left, or a window open that I was sure I'd closed. When I mentioned these to Mark, he dismissed them as lapses in memory, yet I couldn't ignore the creeping sense of intrusion. The nights became restless. Shadows danced across the walls with a malevolent grace, and the wind howled with a voice that chilled my spine. I found myself wandering the halls at night, plagued by the sensation that something lurked just beyond the edges of my perception. My reflection in the hallway mirror seemed to mock me, its eyes dark and hollow, filled with an understanding that eluded me. Then, one evening, an event transpired that shattered the fragile peace we'd maintained. It was late, the sky a deep indigo, stars obscured by thick clouds. Emily had drifted off after an evening of play, her soft breathing a lullaby that filled the room. I was in the kitchen, tidying up after dinner, when I heard it. A muffled sound, like a cry swallowed by the walls. I froze, my heart thudding in my chest, the sound echoing in my mind. It came again, unmistakable now, a child's voice pleading, "Help me." Panic surged through me as I raced up the stairs, my feet barely touching the steps. I burst into Emily's room, my breath caught in my throat. She lay there, untouched, her sleep undisturbed. The room was as it should be, yet the feeling of wrongness persisted, clinging to the air like a shroud. I checked the windows, the closet, peered under the bed. Nothing. There was no sign of disturbance, no evidence that anyone but Emily had been in the room. I returned downstairs, shaken but trying to rationalize the experience. Perhaps it had been a trick of the wind, or my mind playing games. Yet, deep down, I knew that explanation rang hollow. The following day, I confided in Mark, but he was dismissive, attributing my anxiety to stress and lack of sleep. "Why don't you take a day for yourself?" he suggested, his eyes filled with concern. "Get some rest, maybe see a friend." I took his advice, hoping a day away would clear my mind. But the unease followed me, a specter that refused to be banished. I returned home to find Mark and Emily in good spirits, their laughter a balm to my frazzled nerves. For a brief moment, normalcy returned, the warmth of family life enveloping us. But it was short-lived. That night, as I lay in bed, the house silent save for the rhythmic ticking of the clock, I heard it again. The voice, more insistent, a child's plaintive wail, echoing through the corridors. "Help me," it pleaded, the words tinged with desperation. I leapt from the bed, my heart pounding, driven by a primal need to protect my child. The house was cloaked in darkness as I moved through it, each room a shadowy tableau. Emily's door was ajar, the hallway light casting a sliver of illumination across her sleeping form. She was safe, untouched by whatever haunted these walls. I stepped into her room, the air thick with anticipation, and there, in the darkness, I felt it. A presence, watching, waiting. Unable to shake the feeling, I turned, my gaze falling on the mirror opposite Emily's bed. My reflection stared back, an unfamiliar face, twisted with fear. But it was the reflection beside mine that sent a shiver down my spine. A shadowy figure stood there, its form indistinct, a dark blur that seemed to pulse with malevolence. Panic gripped me as I blinked, and when my eyes reopened, the figure was gone, leaving only the echo of a child's cry in its wake. I stumbled back, my mind reeling, and in that moment, I understood. The whispers, the shifting objects, the voice, they were all connected, part of a pattern I had been too blind to see. The realization hit me with the force of a tidal wave. Something wanted Emily. The next morning, I was a woman transformed. My nerves taut, I felt every creak and groan of the house with an acute awareness. My daughter remained blissfully unaware, her world filled with laughter and innocence. But I couldn't shake the fear that had taken root, a gnawing dread that grew with each passing hour. I decided to dig into the house's history, seeking answers to the questions that plagued me. Hours were spent at the local library, poring over microfilm and dusty records, tracing the lineage of our home. It was there, in the brittle pages of a forgotten newspaper, that I found my answer. Years ago, our house had been the site of a tragedy. A girl, not much older than Emily, had vanished without a trace, her disappearance a mystery that had haunted the community. Her name was Anna, and though her fate remained unresolved, whispers of foul play lingered. The more I read, the more a pattern emerged, one that suggested her spirit lingered, trapped within the confines of our home. Armed with this knowledge, I returned home, my resolve steeled. I would not allow this specter from the past to harm my family. That evening, I laid a plan, determined to confront the entity that haunted us. I spent hours preparing, gathering items I hoped would offer protection: salt, sage, symbols of faith. I waited until the house was shrouded in darkness, the world outside silent and still. It came as I knew it would, the air thickening with a presence that defied understanding. I felt its eyes on me, a weight that was both oppressive and undeniable. I moved through the house, scattering salt in doorways, whispering prayers under my breath. The atmosphere crackled with energy, charged with a tension that was almost palpable. In Emily's room, the air seemed to freeze, a chill that seeped into my bones. I called out, my voice steady, demanding that the spirit show itself. There was a moment of silence, stretched taut, and then I saw it. The figure from the mirror, no longer a shadow, but a girl, her eyes wide with sorrow and longing. Anna. She hovered near the bed, her form translucent, her mouth forming words that echoed in my mind. "Help me," she repeated, the plea a whisper that resonated deep within. I reached out, compelled by a force beyond reason, my hand passing through her form. She flickered, her image blurring, and for a moment, I saw the truth. The pain, the fear, the yearning for justice that had kept her bound. Compassion replaced my fear as I realized she was not the threat I had imagined, but a lost soul seeking retribution. Her death had gone unanswered, her cries for help drowned out by the passage of time. Empowered by this revelation, I promised her what she sought: justice. The following days were a blur of activity. I reached out to the local authorities, reopening the case that had long been considered cold. The evidence was scant, the trail long faded, but I persisted, driven by a need to set things right. My determination bore fruit, as old secrets were unearthed, truths whispered by those who had long held their silence. In a stunning turn of events, a suspect was apprehended, a man who had lived undetected in our midst, his sins buried beneath layers of respectability. Anna's story was brought to light, her memory honored, her spirit finally laid to rest. The atmosphere in our home shifted, the air lighter, the sense of unease dispelled. But even as the world returned to normal, the echoes of that time lingered, a reminder of the thin veil between our world and the next. I often found myself reflecting on those events, my heart heavy with the knowledge of how close we had come to the brink. Though the presence was gone, I couldn't shake the feeling that something remained, a shadow at the edge of my vision, a whisper in the night. It was as if the house had retained a memory of those dark days, a subtle reminder that some stories never truly end. Emily remained blissfully unaware of the events that had transpired, her innocence preserved. But I knew, deep down, that the experience had changed me irrevocably. I was no longer the same person. My understanding of the world forever altered. As I stand at the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I feel a presence at my side. It is not malevolent. Rather, it is a comforting sense of being watched over, protected. In the silence, I hear a whisper, soft as a breeze. "Thank you," it says, a final farewell from the girl who had been trapped in darkness for far too long. The world moves on, as it always does, but I hold on to the lessons learned, the understanding that sometimes the past reaches out, seeking resolution, seeking peace, and though the fear has faded, a part of me remains wary, attuned to the unseen, the mysteries that lie just beyond our grasp. For that is the nature of life, a tapestry woven with strands of the known and the unknown, the living and the departed, each thread a connection to something greater than ourselves. The autumn leaves had begun to fall, a golden cascade lining the streets of our small suburban town. Life had measured its pace with the steady regularity of the seasons, and I found solace in the mundane rituals of day-to-day living. I had my routines, a morning coffee, a walk with our dog through the park, and an evening where I sat by the window, reading old letters. These letters were all I had left of her, my daughter, Emily, whose presence had vanished like a dream evaporating with the dawn. It had been 3 years since she went missing, 3 years since our world was turned inside out. Yet, every day, I imagined her face in those old photographs, her laughter echoing in the quiet spaces of our home. The day Emily disappeared was unremarkable in its normalcy. She had gone to school, kissed me goodbye, and never returned. The search that followed was thorough yet fruitless. No trace of her was found. The police eventually labeled the case cold, and I was left with an aching void and unanswered questions. Friends and neighbors offered condolences, but their words were hollow, unable to fill the emptiness that had carved itself into my heart. In the evenings, when the world was silent, I would sit by the window and watch the shadows lengthen, hoping that one day she would step through the door, smiling, as if she'd just been out playing in the yard. It was on a crisp October evening that the first disturbance rippled through my carefully maintained facade of normalcy. I was sitting in my usual spot by the window when the doorbell rang. A peculiar unease settled over me as I rose to answer it. Visitors were rare in the evening, and the hour was late. I opened the door to find a girl standing on the porch, her hair wind-tossed and her eyes wide with something that I can only describe as longing. "Mom," she said, her voice a haunting echo from the past. It was Emily. I blinked, convinced I was caught in a cruel dream. She looked older, her features sharper, but there was no mistaking her. She had the same eyes, the same gentle curve of her smile that could light up the darkest of days. I pulled her into my arms, tears streaming down my face as every suppressed emotion flooded to the surface. Joy, disbelief, and a lingering shadow of fear. "Where have you been?" I asked, my voice shaking with a multitude of questions. Her response was vague, cloaked in mystery. "I've been away," she said softly, "but I'm home now." There was something in her tone, a calmness that was unfamiliar, yet I was too overwhelmed to fully grasp it. Over the next few days, Emily settled back in as if she had never been gone. Her return was the talk of the town, whispers trailing us everywhere we went. People were curious, naturally, but they kept their distance, allowing us the space to reconnect as a family. For a time, life seemed to tilt back toward normalcy, with Emily resuming her old routines and slipping naturally into her place at home. Yet underneath the surface, something was amiss. I would catch her staring into space, her gaze unfocused and distant. At night, I heard her murmuring in her sleep, words that were unintelligible, yet filled with an unsettling resonance. There were moments when I'd find her standing at the window, looking out into the night with an expression of profound melancholy. When I asked her about it, she'd smile and assure me everything was all right. But a mother's instinct is rarely wrong. I knew that something was haunting her. The escalation came gradually, as subtle as the changing seasons. Strange occurrences began to plague our home. Lights flickered incessantly, shadows seemed to move of their own volition, and there was a chill in the air that no amount of warmth could dispel. Emily became increasingly withdrawn, her previously luminous presence now shrouded in an aura of impenetrable mystery. She spoke less, and when she did, her words were tinged with a cryptic quality that left me feeling unsettled. I began to notice things missing, little things at first, a book, a picture frame, a favorite mug. But then, larger items disappeared, only to return in odd places with no explanation. The sense of unease grew, a creeping vine twisting through the fabric of our home. It wasn't long before I started hearing whispers in the night, a chorus of voices just beyond comprehension, weaving through the silence. Desperate for answers, I confronted Emily, hoping to unravel the enigma that hung between us. "Emily," I said gently, "where were you? What happened?" She hesitated, the flicker of fear passing through her eyes. "I was lost," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Somewhere dark. They let me go, but they're still with me." "Who are they?" I pressed, my heart pounding in anticipation of a truth I wasn't certain I wanted to hear. Emily's eyes met mine, and in that moment, it felt as though a veil had lifted, revealing the depths of her soul. "Spirits," she said, her voice steady and eerily calm. "They're here, watching." The revelation was chilling, a cold hand gripping my heart. I wanted to dismiss her words as the ramblings of a troubled mind, but the evidence was all around us. The inexplicable phenomena, the pervasive sense of being watched. My rational mind waged war with the intuition that had been screaming at me since her return. As the days passed, the disturbances intensified. Objects flew off shelves, doors slammed shut of their own accord, and the whispers grew louder, forming a cacophony that echoed through the house. I felt trapped in a waking nightmare, each day blurring into the next, as reality seemed to unravel at the seams. One evening, When the wind howled outside and the moon cast an eerie glow over the town, the climax unfolded in a sequence of events that felt both inevitable and surreal. I awoke to find Emily standing at the foot of my bed, her expression serene, yet tinged with an otherworldly sadness. "They want you to know," she said, her voice carrying an unsettling gravity. "They want you to understand." Before I could respond, the air around us seemed to thicken, charged with an energy that was palpable and oppressive. Shadows danced along the walls, forming shapes that defied explanation. The whispers crescendoed into a chorus of anguish, their voices a symphony of despair that pierced the silence. "Emily, what is this?" I cried out, fear and confusion tightening their grip on me. "They're lost," she replied softly. "They want peace." In that moment, I understood. The spirits that lingered were not here to harm us, but to communicate, to reach out from their shadowed realm in search of solace. Emily, in her time away, had become a conduit, a bridge between worlds. Her return was not just a miracle. It was a plea for understanding, a call to acknowledge the presence of those who could not rest. The realization brought with it a sense of calm, a clarity that cut through the fear. I reached for Emily's hand, squeezing it gently as a silent promise passed between us. Together, we would help these restless souls find the peace they sought. In the days that followed, the disturbances abated, the atmosphere in our home shifting from tension to quietude. Emily and I worked together, learning to listen to the whispers, to discern the stories hidden within their spectral cadence. We performed small rituals, lighting candles and speaking words of comfort, offering a beacon of hope to those trapped in the shadows. Life resumed a semblance of normalcy, but the experience left an indelible mark on us both. Emily seemed lighter, her eyes brighter, as if the weight of her burden had been lifted. The house, too, felt different, warmer, more welcoming, as though it had been cleansed of its lingering unease. Yet, the fear lingered, a shadow that stretched beyond the bounds of our understanding. It was not a fear of the spirits or the supernatural, but of the unknown, the vast expanse of mystery that lay beyond the veil of our perception. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of the lights, held the potential to remind us of the tenuous balance we now walked. In the quiet moments, when Emily and I sat together by the window, watching the world beyond, I would sometimes catch a glimpse of movement in the corner of my eye, a fleeting shadow, a whisper of presence. It was a reminder that we were part of something larger, something that transcended the boundaries of life and death. Though the fear was ever present, it was tempered by a sense of connection, a recognition of our place in the tapestry of existence. We continued to live our lives, bound by the knowledge of the unseen and the understanding that Emily's return had opened a door that could never be closed. And in that acceptance, we found a measure of peace, knowing that we were not alone, that the echoes of the past would always be with us, guiding us through the shadows of the unknown. The day was like any other in our quiet little suburb, a small town where each house stood neatly aligned, each garden meticulously pruned, and every face familiar in the way only small communities can breed familiarity. It was the kind of place where the sun always seemed to cast a warm, golden hue on the sidewalks, where children rode their bikes in languid loops, and adults exchanged pleasantries about weather and work from porch to porch. Life here was predictable, and after the heartache we had endured, predictability was a refuge. 3 years ago, my daughter Emily vanished without a trace. She was 10 at the time, a vibrant force of nature with laughter that bubbled over like a brook and eyes that sparkled with mischief and love. Her disappearance had been like a black hole, swallowing the light from our family and leaving a void that felt endless. Weeks turned into months, and months into years, with each day stretching painfully into the next. Her room remained untouched, a shrine to her memory, filled with toys that yearned for her touch and books waiting for her to return and read them. I remember the day she vanished with a clarity that tormented me. It was a Sunday afternoon, the kind of day where the world seemed to be cocooned in tranquility. Emily had gone to play in the yard, her laughter ringing out like a joyful bell. But when I called her in for dinner, she was gone. The police searched, the community rallied, but all efforts led to dead ends. Eventually, the world moved on, expecting us to do the same. But how could we? Morning routines became a salve. I'd wake, prepare breakfast for just my husband and myself, and then sit on our front porch, sipping coffee as the neighborhood slowly came alive. On this particular morning, I noticed the way the light filtered through the oak tree branches, casting playful shadows on the pavement. Lost in thought, I almost didn't hear the knock at the door. When it came again, insistent, I put down my mug and opened the door. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, I thought I might faint. There, standing before me, was Emily. My heart lurched and my mind raced, struggling to comprehend the image before me. She looked the same as the day she disappeared, unchanged, as if time had merely paused for her. Those same sparkling eyes met mine, but there was something different in them, an unfamiliar depth, an echo of something I couldn't name. "Mom," she said, her voice carrying the soft lilt of familiarity and the sharp edge of the uncanny. I reached out with trembling hands, my heart pounding furiously in my chest, as I pulled her into a tight embrace. She felt solid and real against me, dispelling the fear that I was dreaming. Tears streamed down my face, wetting her hair as I held her, too afraid to let go. "How?" I managed to whisper, my voice choked with emotion. "Where have you been?" But Emily merely smiled, a serene, almost knowing smile that sent shivers down my spine. "I'm home now," she replied softly. "That's all that matters." The days that followed her return were surreal. The initial shock rippled through our community, each neighbor expressing disbelief and cautious joy. The police came and went, but Emily's story was as elusive as the day she vanished. She couldn't, or wouldn't, explain where she'd been. Her answers were vague, veering into the strange and fantastical, leaving us with more questions than answers. She spoke of a place between, where shadows danced, and time was as fluid as water. a place where she was never alone, but never truly with anyone either. While her words unnerved me, I clung to the relief of her presence. Having her back at the dinner table, hearing her laughter fill our home once again, it was a balm for an ache I had thought eternal. Yet, even as I basked in her return, a nagging unease settled deep within me. There were small things, subtle shifts in her behavior that I couldn't quite pinpoint. A certain stillness in her, an uncanny ability to appear and disappear without a sound, and a tendency to stare into the distance as if listening to a voice only she could hear. One evening, as I watched her from the kitchen, I noticed her standing at the window, silhouetted by the dying light of the day, her eyes fixed on something I couldn't see. I approached quietly, hesitant to break whatever spell held her. "Emily?" I called softly. She turned to me slowly, her features bathed in shadows. "They're watching," she said with a small, enigmatic smile. "Who's watching, sweetheart?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "The ones from the between," she replied, her voice almost a whisper. "They're always watching." Her words sent a chill through me, like the ghost of a winter breeze on a summer night. I tried to brush it off, attributing it to a child's imagination, a coping mechanism for whatever she had endured. But the feeling of being watched lingered long after she had gone to bed, casting long shadows in the corners of my mind. The next few weeks unfolded in an uneasy rhythm. Emily's presence seemed to be a catalyst for strange occurrences around the house. Items would go missing, only to reappear in odd places. The lights flickered unpredictably, often leaving us in darkness that felt heavier than it should. Sometimes, in the quiet of the night, I'd hear whispers, soft, unintelligible murmurs that seemed to seep from the walls. Our once peaceful home now felt different, as if another presence had moved in with us, one that was not entirely benign. My husband, ever the rationalist, dismissed these incidents as electrical faults and forgetfulness, but I could see the doubt creeping into his features, mirrored in my own. One particularly restless night, I awoke to find the space beside me empty. My heart skipped as I realized my husband was not in bed. I rose, the wooden floor cold against my feet, and ventured through the darkened house, drawn inexplicably to Emily's room. The door was ajar, and soft light spilled into the hallway. Peering inside, I found Emily sitting cross-legged on her bed, her gaze locked on the wall opposite her, where shadows seemed to ripple and shift like dark water. My husband stood beside her, seemingly transfixed by the same unseen spectacle. "Tom," I called out, my voice barely above a whisper, afraid of breaking the strange spell that held them. He turned to me slowly, his eyes glazed and distant. "They have secrets," Emily said, her voice ringing with an eerie clarity. "They whisper them to me." "What secrets?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and curiosity. Emily's smile was small and secretive. "Secrets of the between," she replied, her words echoing in the stillness. "Things that were, and things that will be." The air felt thick with tension, like the charged atmosphere before a storm. I took a cautious step forward, reaching for Tom, pulling him gently away from whatever had captured his attention. He blinked, confusion clouding his features, but he allowed me to lead him back to bed, leaving Emily to her whispers and shadows. The following days were a swirl of worry and weary vigilance. I kept a close watch on Emily, my heart aching to understand what she had become entangled with. She moved through the days with an ethereal grace, her presence both comforting and unsettling. The sense of being watched intensified, and I began to see fleeting figures at the edge of my vision. Slender silhouettes that vanished when I turned to look directly. One afternoon, while Emily was out playing in the yard, I ventured into her room. It felt different, colder, almost like a place forgotten by the sun. I moved with careful steps, drawn to her small desk where numerous drawings were scattered. They were depictions of shadowy figures, their forms reminiscent of human shapes, but twisted and elongated, set against a backdrop of swirling darkness. My heart pounded as I leafed through them, each image more disquieting than the last. A soft rustle behind me made me jump. I turned to find Emily standing in the doorway, watching me with those deep, knowing eyes. "They like it when I draw them," she said simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "It makes them feel real." I struggled for words, my throat tight with a mix of fear and love. "Emily, why are they here?" She paused, her expression thoughtful, then replied with a haunting simplicity. "They followed me home. They wanted to see where I came from." The realization that these entities had traveled with her from whatever liminal space she had occupied struck me with a visceral dread. Yet, I felt a compulsion to understand, to protect her from whatever malevolent force might be lurking behind those shadowy forms. As the days turned to weeks, the sense of unease grew, twisting into a constant companion. The figures became bolder, lingering at the edge of my vision, their presence an oppressive weight on my psyche. Emily seemed unfazed, moving through our world with the same ethereal grace, her interactions with the shadows becoming a natural part of her routine. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the house was bathed in twilight, I felt an overwhelming compulsion to confront whatever had taken root in our home. I gathered my courage and approached Emily's room, the air thick with an otherworldly charge. Inside, the shadows moved like a living tapestry across the walls, their forms more distinct and sinister than ever before. Emily sat in the midst of them, her face serene, watching their dance with an unsettling calm. "Emily," I called softly, stepping into the room. "It's time for this to end. We need to let them go." She turned to me, her expression unreadable. "They won't leave," she said, her voice a gentle murmur. "Not until they've taken what they came for." My heart sank at her words, the weight of their implications settling over me like a shroud. "What do they want?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Emily's gaze bore into mine, filled with an ancient wisdom that belied her years. "They want what was taken from them," she replied, her voice a haunting melody. "They want something that belongs to this world." Before I could press further, The shadows surged forward, enveloping the room in inky darkness. I felt their presence, cold and vast, pressing in from all sides. Panic clawed at the edges of my mind, but I forced myself to remain grounded, focusing on the love I held for Emily, using it as an anchor against the encroaching void. In the heart of that darkness, I heard their whispers, fragments of a story long forgotten, of lives interrupted and promises broken. The weight of their sorrow was overwhelming, a torrent of emotions that threatened to drown me. But through the chaos, Emily's voice rang clear, guiding me back to the light. "They just want to be remembered," she said softly, as the shadows began to recede, leaving behind a lingering chill. "They need someone to hold their story, to keep it alive." Her words hung in the air, a revelation that settled over me with a profound clarity. These entities, whatever they were not here to harm, but to find closure, to be brought into the light of remembrance. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in our home shifted. Emily continued to draw, her images transforming from dark, shadowy figures to vibrant depictions of light and life. The sense of being watched faded, replaced by a quiet peace that settled over the house like a gentle rain. Though the shadows were gone, their presence lingered in my thoughts, a reminder of the fragility of the boundary between our world and whatever lay beyond. Emily remained unchanged by time, her laughter a joyous symphony that filled our home, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. As summer turned to autumn, I found myself on the porch once again, watching the leaves dance in the wind. The world around me felt renewed, vibrant with the promise of a new day. And though a part of me would always wonder about the mysteries of the between, I knew that for now, our family was whole. Emily was home, and that was all that truly mattered. The soft hum of the kettle resonated gently in the kitchen, a comforting melody in my otherwise silent house. I watched the steam curl upward, dissipating into the morning air, just as I prepared my solitary breakfast ritual of toast and tea. This was my routine now, a quiet life on the outskirts of a small-town suburb where the days blurred together into a seamless tapestry of sameness. I had learned to find solace in these small rituals, to bury the aching void of my daughter's absence in the methodical motions of daily life. It had been 3 years since Emily disappeared. 3 agonizing years since that sunny afternoon when she ran out to play with her friends and never returned. The search parties, the police investigations, the endless questions with no answers, they all led to dead ends and faded into a grim acceptance of the unknown. People in town were kind, but kept their distance, as though grief were contagious, and I was a walking reminder of the fragility of their own loved ones. Yet, just as the kettle whistled its crescendo, a knock echoed through the quietude of my home, startling me. I wasn't expecting anyone, and visitors were a rarity. I hesitated, teacup in hand, before setting it down and moving toward the door, a strange sense of anticipation prickling my skin. I opened the door to find her standing there, a vision from a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. Emily, my Emily, but not quite. The girl before me wore the same familiar features, The cascade of chestnut hair, the deep-set, curious eyes. Yet there was something different in her gaze, an unsettling depth that seemed to pierce right through me. "Hello, Mom," she said, her voice a haunting echo of a memory. I stood paralyzed, my mind struggling to reconcile the impossible. She looked older, of course, as time had not stood still for either of us. But it was more than age. It was as if she had lived a lifetime in those 3 years, and perhaps she had. "Emily?" I whispered, the name of fragile hope escaping my lips. She nodded, a small, almost imperceptible smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. I reached out instinctively, my fingers trembling as they brushed against her cheek, real and warm. A sob choked its way up my throat, and I pulled her into a tight embrace, the scent of her hair a nostalgic balm to my fractured soul. But even as I held her, I felt a coldness emanate from her skin, a chill that seemed to seep into my bones. As the initial shock ebbed away, questions flooded my mind, each one vying for release. Where had she been? How had she survived? What had happened to her? But all those inquiries tangled into silence, overwhelmed by the sheer impossibility of her presence. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice soft, almost pleading. Of course. I stepped aside, and she walked in with an air of familiarity, as though she had never left. The day unfolded with an eerie normalcy. I found myself making tea again, this time for both of us, watching her as she sat at the kitchen table, her fingers tracing the grain of the wood, her eyes lingering on each corner of the room, as if reacquainting herself with a long-lost friend. We spoke little, words trembling through the tension of the moment, and I let her lead the conversation, careful not to push too hard, too fast. "Do you remember this place?" I asked, my voice tentative. She tilted her head slightly, her gaze meeting mine with an inscrutable expression. Bits and pieces, like fragments of a dream. It was then I noticed the shadows under her eyes, the pallor of her skin, and a chill seeped through me once more. Something was not right. But how could I question the miracle of her return? Could a mother's love not forgive all transgressions, all impossibilities? As the day gave way to evening, Emily remained, her presence both comforting and disquieting. I found myself watching her closely, noting every gesture, every flicker of emotion. Her laughter was the same, yet tinged with an edge of something darker, something that lay just beneath the surface. That night, she slept in her old room, a place I had left untouched since her disappearance. I stood by the door, watching her form rise and fall with breath, a miracle I dared not question aloud. Yet sleep eluded me, haunted by an unease I couldn't shake, and I found myself wandering the house, each creak of the floorboards echoing like a ghostly whisper. In the days that followed, Emily's presence became both a balm and a burden. She began to recount stories of her time away, snippets of a life that seemed both fantastical and terrifying. Her words painted a world of shadowy figures and hidden realms, a place where time twisted and reality blurred. She spoke of beings who watched and whispered, guardians and captors in equal measure. I listened, torn between disbelief and a mounting dread. "Why did you come back?" I asked one evening as we sat by the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Emily turned to me, her eyes reflecting the dying light, and for a moment I saw something ancient and knowing within them. "I had to," she replied simply, yet the weight of her words lingered, heavy and impenetrable. As days turned into weeks, the atmosphere in the house shifted. I couldn't quite place when it started, but the air grew thick with an oppressive presence. Strange occurrences began to unravel the fragile semblance of normalcy we had tried to cultivate. Doors creaked open of their own accord. Shadows seemed to dance in the corners of my vision, and at night, whispers threaded through the air, too soft to understand, but impossible to ignore. I tried to rationalize, to attribute these happenings to stress and exhaustion, but the truth loomed ever larger, undeniable and terrifying. Emily was different, changed in ways that defied understanding. She seemed to know things before they happened, her eyes distant and knowing, as though she carried the weight of secrets too profound to voice. One night, driven by a restless curiosity and mounting fear, I ventured into her room while she slept, searching for answers in the silence. Her journal lay on the bedside table, its pages worn and stained. Hesitation clawed at me, but I opened it, driven by a desperate need to understand. The entries were scattered, a tapestry of thoughts and experiences that painted a portrait of a fractured mind. She wrote of the place she had been taken to, a realm between worlds where shadows danced and time stretched like elastic. Her words spoke of figures who loomed at the edges of her awareness, watching, waiting. Her final entry sent a chill racing down my spine. "I cannot stay. They will come for me, and I must be ready." In that moment, I understood. Emily's return was not the miracle I had longed for, but something far more complex and terrifying. She had crossed a boundary, touched a world that should remain unseen, and now that world reached back for her. As realization settled in, the house seemed to shudder, as if acknowledging the truth I had uncovered. The whispers grew louder, the shadows more insistent, and I felt their gaze upon me, probing, questioning. I confronted Emily the next morning, the words spilling out of me in a torrent of fear and desperation. "What is happening, Emily? What have you brought back with you?" She looked at me with those ancient eyes, sadness etched into her features. "I'm sorry, Mom," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I could keep them at bay, but they're already here." A cold despair settled over me, and I understood then that I was powerless to stop whatever was coming. Emily's presence was both a gift and a curse, a tether to a world beyond comprehension. In the days that followed, the disturbances escalated. The house became a living entity, groaning under the strain of an unseen force. Lights flickered and died, mirrors cracked without warning, and a chill permeated every corner. Emily's health deteriorated, her vibrant spirit dimming as though the very life was being drained from her. I watched, helpless, as the fabric of our reality unraveled. And then, one night, the climax I had feared unfolded. Shadows congealed into form, a presence that filled the room with an oppressive force. Emily stood at the center, her eyes closed, a tranquility about her that was both eerie and profound. "I'm sorry," she whispered to me, as if from a great distance. "But it's time." The shadows closed in, enveloping her in a cocoon of darkness. I screamed, reaching out, but my hands passed through empty air. And then, as quickly as it began, it was over. The room was empty, and Emily was gone. Again. The silence that followed was absolute, a void that stretched into the corners of my soul. I stumbled back, the weight of what I had lost crushing me. Emily had returned only to be taken once more, her presence a fleeting echo of a reality forever altered. In the aftermath, the house returned to its stillness, the disturbances ceasing as abruptly as they had begun. But the fear lingered, a constant shadow that refused to dissipate. I knew now that the boundaries between worlds were fragile, and that my daughter had been a bridge between them. Life continued in the small-town suburb, the routine of daily life, a comforting distraction from the truth that lay beneath. But in moments of quiet, I felt the presence that watched and waited, a reminder of the unknown that lurked just beyond the veil of perception. Emily's return had been both a gift and a curse, a lesson in the unfathomable depths of love and loss. And though she was gone, her memory remained, a haunting specter that whispered of things unseen and a world forever changed.